November 5th, the 1-year anniversary of Trump's election. The fall of the Trump regime. November 5th, flood D.C. in non-violent protest. Surrounds the White House. Surrounds the Capitol. Surround the illegitimate, fascist-packed Supreme Court. Come back again and again. Across the country, refuse to comply. This is our only chance to actually remove, to drive out this regime from power. November 5th must be the biggest, most determined, nonviolent mass mobilization and assembly in the Capitol in American history. Take this up. Make history.
Hello and welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is episode 263. Today is Thursday, August 28th. My name is Annie Day. What you just heard is the call from Refusefascism.org and welcome to everyone for a mass mobilization on November 5th in DC to drive the fascist regime from power. And I want to repeat what they said. This must be the most massive mobilization in America's history in this nation's capital. I'm joined today by Michelle Chai.
Hello, Annie. Very, very exciting to be back in studio with you today. Welcome to everybody watching at home. This show is about an actual revolution, a revolution to abolish, to defeat this system of capitalism, imperialism that is the source of so much horror and oppression. We base ourselves on the new communism that has been brought forward by the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian. And because we are about a real emancipating revolution to put an end to all of these horrific forms of exploitation and oppression, a system that has given rise to this fascism that we are confronting today is why we Revcoms are fully throwing in and taking up this historic call by refusefascism.org to flood Washington, D.C. on November 5th, 2025, and to keep coming back in raising the demand that Trump must go now.
And it really must. The urgency is profound. Earlier this week, this fascist Trump declared himself as fully above the law.
So the line is that I'm a dictator, but I stop crime. So a lot of people say, if that's the case, I'd rather have a dictator. But I'm not a dictator. I just know how to stop crime. I have the right to do anything I want to do. I'm the president of the United States. If I think our country's in danger, and it is in danger in these cities, I can do it.
On Monday, he signed an executive order to create a segment within the National Guard to quell civil disturbances. This is ahead of time. A plan to crush mass protest and outrage and unrest, and we cannot allow that to stand. And the fascist ghoul and architect Stephen Miller basically said that the Democratic Party, their counterpart within the ruling class of this system, is an organization of domestic extremists.
The Democrat Party does not fight for, care about, or represent American citizens. It is an entity devoted exclusively to the defense of hardened criminals, gangbangers, and illegal alien killers and terrorists. The Democrat Party is not a political party. It is a domestic extremist organization.
Now, just people have to think about what Stephen Miller just said. He is putting the Democratic Party, the ruling class counterparts of the Republicans, in the realm and the sphere of domestic extremists, which means what can they do to people in that category? Surveil, silence, imprison, prosecute, crush. And they're talking about John Bolton, himself a war criminal, but has been an opponent of Trump, has an FBI raid at his home. They're going after Obama, Hillary Clinton, and the list goes on and on and on. Why do they have to do this? Because as part of remaking the whole government and form of rule, they actually have to crush those counterparts. And if they can do this to the other section of rulers of this system, which again, they're driven and forced to do, what does that mean they can do to the masses of people?
That's right. And on the other hand, here's the other side of it, right? Is that the rulers are deeply split, right? And this brings us back to the urgency and the timeliness of the November 5th call if there is actually a mass mobilization, not just small protests here and there, but massive mobilization that continues to pour out into the streets across this country, that actually pushes, from below on the situation where they are deeply split, that actually could push the side of the ruling class to actually say, hey, you got to step down, you got to go, this can actually be very favorable to the masses of people. But that means we have to take responsibility for this. That means we have to throw in all we've got now to mobilize people into the streets and not just rely on them. It's not going to happen without the mass resistance from below.
That's right. And if we don't do it quickly, and in this time frame, that window closes and people are crushed and silenced and repressed and forced to go along with this. Now, the other thing that happened earlier this week is on Monday, Trump signed an executive order attempting to make flag burning illegal. Well, we are very excited to have an interview with the notorious flag burner, Gregory Joey Johnson. Joey took the right to burn the flag. He was arrested for it in 1984, and he took the case all the way to the Supreme Court and won the constitutional right to burn the American flag. We're going to go to that interview with Joey, but first we're going to have a social media video from Rafael Cadares, which helps set the stage.
Trump just signed an executive order directing the Justice Department to prosecute people for burning the American flag.
If you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail.
Never mind the fact that flag burning is constitutionally protected free speech.
Through a very sad court, I guess it was a 5-4 decision, they called it freedom of speech.
I guess there was a 5-4 decision. That's right, it was Texas v. Johnson. Gregory Joey Johnson, a member of the Revcoms, was arrested for burning the American flag at the Republican National Convention in Dallas in 1984. And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court that ruled that flag burning is symbolic speech protected by the First Amendment.
When you burn the American flag, it incites riots because the people in this country don't want to see our American flag burned and spit on.
Sorry, you can't use the fact that an audience takes offense to certain ideas in speech to justify suppression of that speech. This was literally written into the Texas v. Johnson decision, and this has been reaffirmed many times, including in a case that I was part of when a group of 16 Revcoms, including Joey Johnson once again, was illegitimately arrested for burning the flag at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland in 2016. But none of that matters to the fascist in chief who sits there in his throne stripping away basic rights with the stroke of a pen. Yes, this will probably go up to the Supreme Court once again, but there's now a majority that, as Bob Avakian put it,
the fact is that the Supreme Court majority is determined to enable Trump to bulldoze over challenges to his fascist regime, regardless of legal precedent, basic logic, and the obvious meaning of things, including the Constitution.
This executive order is another big leap in fascism, eliminating free speech and dissent and shoving patriotism down people's throats. We've already seen students arrested for criticizing Israel, mayors and senators arrested for speaking out against ICE raids. We're seeing parks and museums whitewashed of any historical truth which challenges the narrative of American greatness. This has already gone way too far already, and now they're going to throw people in jail for a year for symbolic speech? Next, it'll be jail for waving a Mexican flag or flying the U.S. flag upside down or not standing for the national anthem. Forcing everyone to pledge allegiance to a white Christian fascist America? This is not looming off in the distant future, it's here.
This demonstrates very clearly the profound truth that all those who oppose the tyrannical madness of this Trump fascist regime must mobilize with continuing and growing determined nonviolent action to prevent this fascist regime from functioning and create the conditions where it is removed from power before it can fully consolidate its rule of fascist atrocity.
As refusefascism.org says, the time has come for the fall of the Trump fascist regime. Beginning November 5th, the one-year anniversary of Trump's election, flood D.C. and nonviolent protests don't stop until Trump is removed.
So we are thrilled to welcome Joey Johnson to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. Welcome, Joey.
Hey, thanks, man. Great to be with you.
I want to start just by asking, we just this week saw the fascist Trump sign this executive order attempting to outlaw flag burning. And immediately in response, a veteran burned a flag in front of the White House.
I'm burning this flag as a protest to that illegal fascist president that sits in that house. Do this for every single one of you American citizens. We burn this flag in protest to that president who feels that it's his right to do whatever he wants, make whatever law he wants.
What was your response to that?
That was great. I was excited to see it. I was really moved by it. And he was prompt. He was on it. He was right out there the same day, right out in that afternoon. And it was great what he did, and what he said was right on point as well. I mean, I think he, from his own perspective, has a 20-year combat veteran, somebody who was in the military apparatus of this monstrous system. From his own perspective, he saw it important to denounce this fascist executive order, criminalizing burning the flag in protest, and that's something I think is really important. I really welcome the diversity of views, people coming from a lot of different perspectives. They want to reclaim America. They don't want these crimes against the people, against the rights of the people to dissent, to be muzzled or thwarted, and want to take a stand against it. I appreciate that very much. I mean, I'm coming from my perspective that I see the flag as a symbol of imperialist plunder and murder. It's a symbol of one of the most monstrous and predatory empires in the history of humanity. And it's an empire that needs to fall. It needs to be uprooted. It needs to be overthrown through an actual revolution. And we need to stand with the people of the world. But I very much appreciate that people who want to reclaim the flag or redeem America, they're standing against the outrages that this system commits and refusing to be complicit with it. From that perspective, then there's a lot of common ground for us to stand on and to talk with each other in a principled way about what's at the root of all this and how do we get humanity beyond it. And it's meaningful today to see these veterans that are against this forced patriotism. That either because they, through their experiences and being used to fight for the system, came to have disgust for the kind of patriotic indoctrination they got, or like I said, they think it's a betrayal of the flag to require compulsory patriotism, to have compulsory patriotism.
I think that's really important. I think that kind of unity being forged as we come together to fight and to defeat this fascism, where the forced patriotism is a big part of that agenda. But I want to ask you, JJ, to go further when you're talking about where you're coming from and your perspective. In 1984, you burned this American flag at a Republican convention in Texas. And I want to ask what brought you to that position and why you burned the flag at that point.
Well, there's a long history and a short history. I'll try to do a combination of the two, a hybrid. I mean, I came up in this country and I grew up just like everyone else and indoctrinated with the red, white, and blue patriotism. And I considered myself that way when I was a young teenager. A little bit later, I broke with it. But I grew up in a mixed neighborhood in Indiana, an industrial town where my neighbors were black and white. And my mother married a soldier who was home on leave when I was like 9 years old. And we started living on army bases in the South. And I had been indoctrinated, like I said, in the whole G.I. Joe kind of America patriotism. And then come to find out there were Klan chapters on the army base. It was in Anniston, Alabama. And so that got me questioning, like, that's like really, because my mother had taught me to be completely against racism. And from the time I was young. And so that caused me to question. But then more than that, at a certain point, we moved to Germany with my stepfather, who, as I say, was in the military. And I was living on an army base in the dependent housing. And I went on the base every day to sell the Stars and Stripes newspaper in the mess halls to the soldiers. There's a bit of an irony there. But this was 1969 during the high tide of the Vietnam War. And a lot of the soldiers had already turned against the war. Either they were coming back from Vietnam or on their way there. And there was a lot of open discussion, including with me, a 12-year-old. You know, we'd go hang out in their barracks after morning chow and just chop it up about what was going on. And I met these incredible people, and initially it was more the blacks and the Puerto Ricans, but then some of these hip dudes. I remember one dude had been in the band Buffalo Springfield before he got drafted. And they had an influence on me. They told me, kid, don't believe your old man. He's a lifer, you know, like a lifer in prison. He's a lifer in the military. I remember one of my first anti-war statements or acts myself was I had a copy of the Woodstock album, and we lived right next to a motor pool where they were fixing the guns and the howitzers and the tanks, and doing repairs on them or maintenance. And I put a little GE record player I had with speakers up in the window and played Jimi Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner. You know, I said, I'll play that for the soldiers. And they would give me little peace signs and clenched fists and all that. But this was a time when, like, I talked to black soldiers that if they wore if they had one of those Afro picks with the black plastic fist on it, and it was sticking out of their pocket, that the lieutenant would come along with a razor knife or a pair of scissors and cut the handle off, you know. Or if the white dudes wore their hair a little bit long, or they tried to get away with it, it wasn't happening. You know, there's a lot of like trying to intimidate the soldiers, but the soldiers would be bragging about how short they were, meaning how many days or weeks they had left in the military, and their anxiousness to get out of the machine, get out of the war machine of U.S. imperialism.
This is a really important history, JJ, and so then coming to kind of confront in your own thinking and to have that patriotism challenged. Then fast forward, then what brought you to actually then lighting that American flag on fire in '84?
Well, I have to say that the central thing that brought me to it was the internationalism, the revolutionary internationalism of the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian, because he always put tremendous emphasis on the fact that we're standing with the people of the world. This is not, you know, an American affair. We're not making this from America out, you know, but the whole world is integrated. What we have in common is our humanity. We're not going to be used as instruments or tools of empire. And that's like really important when you live in the most monstrous and predatory empire in the history of humanity. You got to break through that America-centric or American chauvinism and think about the consequences for humanity. And you look at the crimes that have gone on in Gaza right now. It's horrendous, and that's all made in the USA. It's Israel. It's U.S.-backed Israeli genocide going on in Gaza of the Palestinian people. And it's horrendous and horrific and criminal, monstrously criminal. But it's a monstrously criminal system, you know, that the fascist Trump is just the latest incarnation of, or it's taken things to a whole nother level.
You've answered the last question I want to ask, but I'm going to ask it. The times I have you on video now several times in 2016 at the Republican convention.
America was never great. We're taking a stand against this imperialist Republican National Convention. We're standing here with the people of the world today. We're standing here with the people of the world today.
In 2019, in front of the White House, when you lit the American flag on fire, and first you said, "We're standing here with the people of the world."
We're standing with the people of the world today. We're standing with the people of the world today.
5, 6, 7, 8, America was never.
And can you say a little bit more about what that means, including what it means to imagine a world without America and without the America that flag represents?
What I think it means to be doing this right now is, like, more than ever, we can see how humanity is integrated and interwoven with each other all over interdependent with each other all over the world. And both in a positive sense, like Bob Avakian talks about how the astronauts being in outer space and looking down at the Earth, they don't see borders. They don't see walls and barbed wire. They see there's one planet Earth, but yet this system is insistent upon the world being divided up between competing aggregates or whole countries of concentrations of capitalism, national markets, and fighting over the shipping lanes and who's going to be the dominant empire and the big shot caller, the big gangster of the world. That's an expand or die of capitalism, of imperialism. And that's what the rulers of the system are locked into. Those are the rules they're locked into, but there's no reason for all of us, for humanity to be locked into that, for all of us for all the people that are suffering from that division of the world in Sudan and Gaza and all over the planet, not just the most impoverished and brutally oppressed places, that especially, but all over the planet, the interconnectedness of people. And it's one planet Earth, and it's one global environment that's being destroyed. It's not, climate change is not particular to just one country. It's all over the planet. But what also is all over the planet is our reliance and interdependence on each other. This is a world where we could adequately feed and clothe people all over the planet, and provide a decent cultural level many times over. There's just one thing standing in the way: this capitalist imperialist system. And now we're in a special moment where the fascist Trump is putting all of that on steroids, the unnecessary suffering of the people of the world. And it's up to us, people from really broad perspectives, to come together to make this society ungovernable. I'm completely down with the refuse fascism call. I'm completely down with the call to flood DC on November 5th. The time is now for the fall of the Trump regime. It must go now. And for people to come into the streets from all different perspectives and to have these kind of conversations we're having right here, to have them out in the streets as we're marching together, as we're making trouble, good trouble for the capitalists and imperialists by surrounding their White House, surrounding the Capitol building, surrounding the Supreme Court, and to stand with the people of the world. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. It's really urgent.
Well, thank you so much, JJ. It's really right on time. It's so good to have your voice. And I think you give a lot of content to what it means when we say, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America.
Absolutely.
Sending you a great big hug, and we'll hope to have you back again on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
In the interview with Joey, he mentioned the work that Bob Avakian has done on revolutionary internationalism. And we're going to be hearing more from Bob Avakian exactly on that question at the end of today's episode. So definitely stay tuned. And now we want to watch a social media video from Lenny Wolf about the illegitimate fascist Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court is a rogue court, a blunt instrument of Trump MAGA fascism. It's become totally illegitimate, and as such, it must not be respected. Here's 3 reasons why. First, in June 2024, this rogue court granted presidents lifetime immunity for any acts committed in the execution of their duties. This kind of power had never before been envisioned in U.S. constitutional law. Right away, this meant that Trump would not have to face trial for his criminal acts in attempting to steal the 2020 election, including the insurrection of January 6, 2021. It was a get-out-of-free-jail card for Trump and a huge boost just months before the election. But it was far worse than that. One of the 3 dissenting justices, Sonia Sotomayor, said this: "The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune, 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 immune. John Roberts, head of this rogue court, did not deny or even address Sotomayor's point in his rebuttal. So next time you hear Trump threaten to prosecute and even execute his political opponents, remember Sotomayor's argument. 2, this rogue Supreme Court has continually blocked and sabotaged the efforts of lower courts to hold Trump accountable to the Constitution. Take birthright citizenship, which guarantees that all children born here, including children of immigrants, are automatically citizens. It's part of the Constitution. It's an amendment that came out of the Civil War. You want to change that, Trump? You got to amend the Constitution. Oh, that's too complicated, you say. So I'll just issue one of my bogus executive orders. Right. Here I want to turn to Bob Avakian in his social media message 126, more on why only the sustained, determined action of the decent people can be relied upon to defeat and remove the Trump fascist regime. He goes very deeply into this case and its implications, and I want to urge everyone to get into this. As BA outlines, quote,
Number of lower court judges quickly put a stop to this, citing the obvious fact that this executive order violates the Constitution. So the Trump regime appealed to the Supreme Court, not asking the court to rule now on the merits of this, whether his executive order itself is in violation of the Constitution, but instead to rule that lower court judges cannot issue decisions that apply to the whole country, nationwide injunctions. Such nationwide injunctions have been issued many times over the years, and they are especially necessary to stop the government from violating fundamental rights, such as the right to citizenship.
But the fascist court gave Trump just what he wanted, exactly when he wanted, and invented whole new rules to do it. Again, I want you to go listen to BA's social media message 126 to get into the guts of this very important decision. 3, you can read even more proof at this week's issue of RevCom.us on how the fascist court hands down some of its most important decisions in midnight shadow dockets when the rogue majority rarely explains its reasoning and where overwhelmingly it rules in favor of Trump, how they stole 2 of their seats, and how some of them had outrageous conflicts of interest when they ruled to stop the prosecution of Trump, when they ruled in effect to stop the prosecution of Trump for January 6th. Conflicts of interest like Clarence Thomas's wife being an activist in the whole Stop the Steal movement and in January 6th itself. But the point is this. This Supreme Court has, through its own actions, made itself illegitimate. This Supreme Court will not save the country. It will not defend the Constitution, and it will not save any of us. The only thing we have to rely on in confronting this fascist threat is ourselves acting together. Be part of millions in D.C. on November 5th to demand the fall of the Trump fascist regime. Be there day after day, night after night, non-violently but determinedly confronting this regime. And when we're there, let's surround this illegitimate fascist court, along with the White House and Congress, chanting, the Trump fascist regime must go now.
I'm so glad Lenny did that video. I think it's really important that people recognize that, one, no matter how it comes to power, fascism is illegitimate. But two, even on its own terms, these institutions are illegitimate and they actually do have to be driven out. We shouldn't accept the dictates of these fascist vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I've been running into just being out in the streets talking to people about this is how much people are still, they hate what Trump is doing, but there's still this kind of, illusion that the courts and the normal processes are going to save us. Even in a rapid response network that I'm a part of, where people are like, hey, there's this temporary block, from the judge here in LA where they're not supposed to be patrolling the neighborhoods and picking people up. And yet the very person that's leading the border patrol here in LA has said to news media straight up that this is exactly what they're doing. And people are saying, well, let's just get as much evidence as we can so we could present it in front of the court and look at exactly where Lenny was taking things on. He's, the Supreme Court has basically given full immunity to Trump to go after not just civilians, but people within the ruling class. This is what it means that it's fascism. And this brings us back to, where he ended this message, right? Where Lenny Wolf ended the social media message, November 5th, why we have to not wait around and try to figure out how we're going to fight through this, kind of here and there and trying to do different things. It matters to be standing up against these ICE raids, but we have to mobilize all we can into Washington, D.C. to flood the streets. And we're not talking about small protests that somehow kind of get large. We're saying the biggest protest, the biggest mobilization in U.S. history in Washington, D.C. this November 5th.
Yeah, it means everyone everywhere has to take this up. I mean, this is our only chance to actually defeat and drive out this fascism. And you said at the beginning of the show, there's no living with this fascism. Science, vaccines, the environment, danger of nuclear war, mass incarceration. I mean, on and on and on. There's no arena of life that is untouched and will remain untouched by this fascism. We have to be what stops this, what halts this, what actually prevents fascism from consolidating. I was talking with a good friend of mine about what it means, a point we've made on this show, that people have to make the number one priority in their lives defeating this fascism, driving this regime from power. And they asked me, well, what does that actually mean? So I want to say very explicitly what that means. That means that you have to take a leave from work. And if you actually can't take a leave from work, it means you have to figure out at your work how you're going to build for people to be in DC on November 5th. It means if you're a student, try to take fewer classes this semester. And in any case, no matter how many classes you have, make your number one priority at school building for busloads of people to be in DC on November 5th. It means postpone your vacation. Don't plan your hiking trip right now. I mean, fine, take a day off and go for a hike, but don't go away for 2, 3, 4 weeks right now. Right now, the question you have to ask yourself in looking back at history, if there is history to be told, what will you have done? Where were you when fascism was consolidating? Were you putting yourself in the way to say, no, it stops here? Or were you capitulating and conciliating and accommodating to this fascism?
Here's one place to start, right? Is get this poster, put it up everywhere. It has the basic call for the fall. The time has come for the fall of the Trump fascist regime. This has to be up in every wall, in every pole, all over the city, all over the country. Grab a bunch of these, get them out everywhere. Grab your friends, whether it's on your campus, in your neighborhood, get out with these and just get them out everywhere. Raise some funds because these have to be printed in the millions and they have to be up everywhere. It's not just kind of they'll go up here. They have to be everywhere people are going, they are seeing this. And I want to point to the bottom of the poster. It says this was initiated by refusefascism.org and it is welcoming everyone to join the biggest nonviolent mobilization in U.S. history. So everyone, I know I've been talking to some people that are kind of they've been talking to different people in their neighborhood and their friends and then maybe there's those people that you haven't even thought about, that you haven't even hit up in a while, call them up, and say this now is the time to actually get with this.
This weekend is Labor Day weekend. People are going to be in the parks. They're going to be at the beaches. They're going to be in the streets in mass protest. This weekend, make a goal of distributing Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of these posters, getting them up everywhere. That is a concrete thing you can do immediately. What else can you do? You can donate. You can ask people you know for funds. Go to refusefascism.org. They have to raise a shit ton of money, like serious money, seriously. Spread this on social media. If you go to their social media, they're doing messages every day. Spread those actively. What else can you do? Rent an Airbnb or a hotel in DC right away. If you have the funds, rent a block of hotels and let Refuse Fascism know that those are available for people. Get concrete. Plan to be in DC on November 5th. Plan to bring as many people as you can and dedicate your time right now and over the next week to getting millions there.
Trump must go now! 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 Trump must go now!
On Monday morning, Israel bombed another hospital in Gaza. This time, it was Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, the last functioning hospital in southern Gaza. After aid workers and journalists went scrambling to help people, Israel bombed a second time.
The journalists were killed, along with more than a dozen civilians and first responders in the back-to-back strikes on Nasser Hospital.
They hit the hospital's emergency department, inpatient ward, and surgical unit. 20 people were killed, including 5 journalists. Hussam al-Masri worked as a cameraman for Reuters. Mariam Daga was a 33-year-old photographer for AP. Moaz Abu Taha was a photojournalist for Reuters and Haaretz. Ahmed Abu Aziz was 28 years old. He worked for Middle East Eye. And Mohammed Salama worked for Al Jazeera and Middle East Eye.
Palestinian journalists right now are crying. If I show you my colleagues that are sitting between the reporting and between their live shifts, they're trying to hold their tears. They're trying to find the words to describe what's going on. Our colleagues were killed live on air. And there's no way there are any words to describe what's happening. Every single day we're mourning people. We're still grieving Anas and Muhammad, and we're still trying to stand up and getting our strength.
Bombing hospitals, targeting civilians. These are war crimes. But Israel does it again and again and again for over 1.5 years. Over 60,000 people dead, with likely many, many thousands more uncounted and buried under rubble, decomposing amidst the ash. This time, instead of lying through his teeth that this bombing was justified, the genocidal monster and head of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, Netan-Nazi, lied through his teeth and made a statement that Israel deeply regrets the tragic mishap that occurred today at the Nasser Hospital in Gaza. Tragic mishap? My ass. Israel has drones flying above Gaza 24/7. They closely track journalists and aid workers, calling them, threatening them, bombing their families, and targeting them for assassination in their cars or their homes and even their tents. Over 247 journalists now killed. None of what Israel is doing with the U.S.'s full backing is a mishap. But that's not all. Netan-Nazi went on to say that the military authorities are conducting a thorough investigation. A thorough investigation? The investigation, like about the Flower Massacre of February 2024, where 118 Palestinians were killed and 760 injured, while waiting for an aid convoy? And when shots rang out, people started to run, but were met by waves of gunfire. The dead were soaked in blood and flour. After Israeli's army's lies about what had started the melee were exposed by CNN, the army promised a further investigation. Or like last May, after a tent camp was bombed and 45 people burned alive in Rafah. After the outcry, once again, Netan-Nazi said a tragic mistake had been made and the authorities would investigate. Or like last April, when an aid convoy with clearly marked trucks from the World Central Kitchen was bombed on a road that the Israelis knew they would be on, killing 7 international aid workers. And once again, the Israeli military said they'd made a grave mistake and would investigate. Or what about last month, when the Israeli army bombed a water collection point, killing at least 10 people, including 6 children, in central Gaza? The military said they'd made a technical error and would look into it further. Or also last month, when Israel bombed the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Porphyrius, the third oldest church in the world. 3 people were killed, and Israel once again issued a statement of regret. Or let's go all the way back to January 2024. 6-year-old Hind Rajab was alone in a car surrounded by her dead family, all of whom had just been killed by the Israeli army. She had the wherewithal to call the paramedics, who stayed on the phone with her for hours while she begged for help, with the sound of shooting echoing all around.
أجي أخذك حبيبتي طيب ما أنا يا حبيبتي رح أجي أخذك هلا عمو من الهلال عماله عم بنصك عشان إحنا نقدر نيجي ناخذك حواليكي في ضرب رصاص خديني يا حبيبتي والله بدي أخذك بس مش بإيدي هلا.
After they thought it was safe, an ambulance was dispatched to rescue Hind. But the clearly marked ambulance was bombed by the Israeli army, killing the 2 emergency workers inside. After people were able to finally go to the site, 6-year-old Hind was found dead, along with her uncle and her aunt and her 3 cousins, and the car was peppered with bullet holes. The IDF first tried to cover all this up, saying there were no soldiers in the area, but when this was met with outrage, they said the probe was ongoing. 88% of Israel's investigations into their own war crimes have been shut down or left unresolved. You will investigate? Lies. Lie after lie after lie, and everyone knows it's a lie, to justify and cover up a genocide live streamed to the whole world. Meanwhile, the fascist Trump calls Netanyahu a war hero.
He's a war hero because we work together. He's a war hero. I guess I am too.
Netanyahu, soaked in the blood of the Palestinian people, praised by Trump, soaked in the blood of the people of the world. These are war criminals. The system that drives this, the system of U.S. capitalism imperialism that requires the Zionist state of Israel as a military outpost in the strategic region of the Middle East, the system that puts these monstrous Nazi madmen into power, is a rotten and an utterly illegitimate system. And this is needless. This system of towering crimes and lies to cover up their crimes is needless, and no one should tolerate living one more day under this system. We need and we demand a whole new way to live and a fundamentally different system.
A whole new world. Think about it. The possibility of getting beyond all of the horrors of what this system puts people through day after day. You've heard Joey Johnson talking about what brought him forward and his deep feeling and anger about what people were having to go through. You've heard what Annie has just laid out about the horrors of what people in Palestine are having to live every day. And there is a way out of this. And there is an orientation for fighting for a world without borders, free of exploitation and oppression. And this is why, as promised, this tremendous and, I have to say, very inspiring clip from the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian from a series of interviews that was done at the beginning of this year, where he gets into internationalism and the possibility of getting to that world. So let's watch.
Let's talk about the international picture a little bit with the new socialist republic. You've made the point about internationalism. The whole world comes first. It's in your book, Basics, from your talks and writings, quotations and essays. How does that apply in the new socialist republic?
Look, there are a number of contradictions that the new communism is setting out to deal with in a way that's beyond the way these contradictions have been dealt with in past communist revolutions and socialist societies. And, I think this is very important to understand. One of these contradictions I referred to, which is How do you advance toward communism on the basis of the masses of people moving to do that through all the different contradictions and ebbs and flows of the process without, as I put it, metaphorically, putting guns at the backs of the mass of people and, in any case, force marching them to communism, which you cannot do and will not work and will actually lead to a revolt against you and will actually lead back to capitalism or feed the forces seeking to go back to capitalism. So that's one contradiction that the new communism is consciously setting out to deal with, or that I've set out to deal with in the new communism, which is actually leading masses of people through all the contradictions and difficulties to advance on the road to uprooting and overcoming all these exploitative and oppressive relations and advancing to communism without, force marching to people to do it. Or another way to put it is, how do you do that without turning out the lights intellectually and culturally? And that relates to another very profound contradiction of transforming the world in the direction of communism and transforming particular countries on the road to communism as part of an overall international or world process. And that is, how do you orient your society to actually, including the economy in particular as the foundation of everything, how do you orient it toward meeting the fundamental needs of the masses of people, in particular their basic material needs on an expanding basis, as well as their intellectual and cultural needs, without, once again, turning out the lights, without, not providing for or even suppressing intellectual and cultural ferment, dissent, and so on. This is another contradiction that the new communism is dealing with in a completely different way, on a completely different level than it's been dealt with in the past. Now, another dimension, to get back directly to your question, is the international dimension. How do you handle the contradiction between the things I've been talking about, meeting the needs of the people, transforming the particular country on the road of socialism toward the final goal of communism in the world, with everything that's involved in that I've been just touching on, while at the same time being oriented fundamentally toward advancing the struggle of people worldwide toward the same goal. And that can be a very acute contradiction, both materially in terms of look, there you have, at any given time, you only have so many resources. And you're having a struggle about how you're going to utilize those resources in an exploitive way or in a way that does away with exploitation. How are you going to utilize those resources in a way that's liberating, at the same time meeting the needs of the people and within the country, and materially as well as politically supporting revolutionary struggles around the world? That's another acute contradiction. And then it can become even more acute if these imperialist countries around the world, as they will move in various ways to try to suffocate, strangle, and actually attack and overthrow your new socialist system. And so therefore you have to provide for the defense of your new socialist system against forces not only within the country but surrounding the country at any given time who want to defeat and destroy what you're working to build. So how do you handle the contradiction between that and actually supporting revolution in the world materially, as well as, in terms of, culturally, politically, and so on? So, all these are dealt with in a different way by the new communism. Not saying, oh, well, let's just do everything for the world revolution, and we don't, so what if people can't go hungry here in this country, or they have no shoes for their children? No, you have to pay attention to those needs as a very basic question, but you have to figure out how to handle the contradiction so at the same time you're increasingly able to give material as well as political support to the revolution in the world as a whole, because you recognize that ultimately, not in any immediate terms, but ultimately, you have to advance to communism on a world level, and you cannot just be an island of socialism within a sea of capitalism, imperialism over any long-term period of time. So even on those terms, as well as the fact that, as you referred to, humanity comes first. That's our basic orientation. There's nothing special or specially good or God-favored or whatever by the people in this country or any other. We're all human beings, and that's the most fundamental identity we have, with all the other things that are very real in terms of oppressive relations. The most fundamental identity we have is as human beings, and we share a common fate as human beings, one way or another. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, even under the auspices of this system, you'll see astronauts and others who go into space and they look at the Earth from the space. And, I've read recently, one of them said the idea of the different countries and, and borders, which are he didn't go this far, but the idea of different countries seems ridiculous when you look at the Earth from space and see it as one thing, And the idea that you have all these barriers and borders and armies, and to enforce all these divisions, and you have people who are declared illegal if they go from one country, one part of that world to another. You step back and you can get the same view as those astronauts and people in space get. This is all one world and one humanity. And even though we have to proceed through different countries and different societies on the road to achieving communism on a world level, to keep in mind that fundamental picture of, the unity of humanity ultimately. And, you can see the unity concretely expressed. People do, come from different parts of the world to other parts of the world all the time. They're always bragging, the ruling class in the country, this is a country of immigrants. Now we got a fascist regime that says we got to get rid of all these so-called illegal immigrants. And, and of course they're going to sweep up, if they have their way, they'll sweep up a lot of legal ones too, even according to the restricted notions of the law. So, this is a fundamental point of orientation of, we are going for the emancipation of humanity as a whole, because that's the way that everyone can get emancipated and no other way ultimately. And because we all share that fundamental identity, if you will, or that fundamental reality of being human beings on one planet.
Again, that was Bob Avakian in the two-part interview, Humanity Does Not Have to Live This Way. You can watch those in full on this channel or at youtube.com/Bob Avakian Official.
This question of internationalism, right, which is not only a morality question, but when you think about where he starts on how you would actually go about making that real, a world without borders, a world free of exploitation and oppression, like nobody, think about it, is actually doing the kind of work and the kind of thinking ahead to like actually, walk through how you would lead a whole society with that orientation of humanity first, right? And so I think this is pretty, and it has everything to do with what we're doing today as we're, waging this fight to defeat this fascist regime, which on its, stark contrast is fighting for America and all of the gross, everything that America represents first, right?
The recognition that people are not even thinking about the questions that Bob Avakian is dealing with and grappling with, including exactly how do you deal in a socialist society with the encirclement of these imperialist countries and yet maintain your situation as a socialist state power and hold on to that power and make it power worth holding on to. And I, again, before we go out, really want to commend people to get into the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America that Bob Avakian has authored, that gives this very concrete expression. And exactly as we are coming together from different perspectives, uniting all who can be united, we have to raise our sights to the kind of world that we ought to be fighting for and break open an actual debate about that. So if you're not following Bob Avakian on social media, follow right away. Follow his Substack, YouTube, Telegram, the short clips on Instagram and all other platforms. This voice needs to spread urgently in this moment, exactly dealing with the situation we're facing, the dire existential situation we're facing with this fascism, and what kind of world we should be fighting for. So I think that brings us to the end of today's show.
Yeah, thanks for watching. Leave a comment, share this video, like and call on others to subscribe and to donate to keep this show going.
donate. Become a Patreon of this show. Patreon.com/the Revcoms. Give $3 every month. Give $50 every month. Anything in between and beyond. Your donation is what keeps this show going and enables us to spread this to others. So support, ask others to support, and we will see you next week.